Hey everyone, and welcome to The Real. This is Daniel Elwood, and my hetero life mate is Robert Paul Johnson, and we are the Last Nighters. You can find us on the Liberty Movement's YouTube channel, and you can also find us at lastnighters.com. This is going to be our episode on The Matrix. This is the first episode of the month of May, and we're doing episodes of The Matrix all month long. We're going to be doing Reloaded next week, Revolutions the week after that, and then Animatrix. And we also have a couple of specials lined up, one for Cinco de Mayo and one for Memorial Day. So lots of activity coming your way from us here at the Last Nighters. And you find the show notes and more for this one at lastnighters.com/174. Now, I'm really excited about this one. Robert and I did an episode of a previous iteration of our podcast years ago, talking about The Matrix and some of the themes and how you can kind of like interpret it based on your worldview. And it's almost like you can plug in your philosophy and find parallels and things like that in this. So it's going to be a lot of fun this entire month talking about this one. And we're going to introduce our guest. He is Jeremiah of Reel on Reels. It is a movie review podcast show that's been on a bit of a hiatus. However, they are really good at doing movie reviews. And he was last on with us a couple of years ago when we did a review of Finding Nemo for Father's Day way back in, what did I say, 2017? Is that what I said? Yeah, 2017. That's a long time ago these days. But Jeremiah, welcome back. We appreciate you coming back and joining us after all these long years.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't do this for so long. Actually, I think the first time I suggested doing this was probably a couple years ago, and just never got around to it until now. But happy to be here.
Yeah, I think The Matrix is one of those movies that it had such an impact on me in my formative years that it's almost like too much to take on to talk about. Like, it's easier for me when there's like 2 or 3 points to make in a movie, and then we can just riff on that for an hour and that's an episode. But when there's like layer upon layer and different interpretations going on, I find that it's a bit more daunting.
Yeah, I feel that. Absolutely. I was kind of frantically making notes today, trying to figure out what's my angle going to be here. And I think I'm just going to take a shotgun approach. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Go scattershot. Why not?
Yep.
So anyway, people can find your past episodes at, we found a link on Twitter, twitter.com/reelonreels. That's RealOnReels. And like I said, you guys did a really great job, you and your co-host, and you had little like segments and games, and it was a lot of fun. So I do recommend that people do check that out. We'll have a link for that on the show notes page, which if I didn't mention, it's lastnighters.com/174, show notes and more.
Yeah, Rob, my co-host and longtime friend, hetero life mate, all that good stuff. He's the talent. He does like the music and pretty much taught me how to use the recording software and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's fun to do. He came up with the name, which bugs me because it's such a good name, and I wish I had thought of it. But it just encapsulated what we were trying to do, because I mean, at least for me, the vision is kind of like to be like kind of revisionists, or to like maybe bring attention to a film that's underrated, or to knock a film down a peg if we think it's overrated, or we planned on doing more debates. We're going to eventually do an episode on Boondock Saints, because it ranks pretty high up there for me as movies that I hate.
Oh, wow.
And Rob actually likes it, so that should be a good one. But what else was I going to say? Yeah, it's when we have this kind of like shtick that we have the real score because our opinions matter more than anybody else's, because we've kind of like done the research and put all the pieces together, and it's we're the ones who are actually being real with you. So a bit ridiculous, but
in a tongue-in-cheek way.
Yeah, exactly. It's tongue-in-cheek.
Now, I do want to say that I was an avid listener, and I really enjoyed your Cable Guy episode and also your Young Frankenstein. Those were both really, really good. And we did Boondock Saints about the same, roughly the same period we had you on for Finding Nemo. So that one was quite a while ago. And I think, I forget, Robert, did we like that movie? I want to say we liked some concept of it or the premise, but it wasn't fully executed or something like that.
You try and test my memory about something on this show? Are you kidding me? I have no idea. I mean, maybe we kind of liked it. I generally have a good feeling about it, but no movie's perfect. And I think I had, some issues about the believability of the characters or the acting or whatever. I remember Willem Dafoe's a lot of fun to watch on screen.
Yeah, agree. Circle gets the square on that one. So anyway, everyone check out Reel on Reels, and I hope you guys get back to doing additional shows. And I appreciate you joining us for this one, as we're going to be talking about The Matrix for Matrix, which is our newly created Festivus of sorts, where we're going to be talking about the Matrix movies each week until our demands are met. And we will start off with the Google description, which I will read presently. So let me see. I got to actually get my eyes adjusted here. Okay, so The Matrix came out in 1999, right on the edge of the future-sounding year 2000 with the Y2K bug and everything like that. It is 2 hours and 20 minutes, got 8.7 out of 10 on IMDb, 88% Rotten Tomatoes, 73% Metacritic, and 90% of Google users liked it, which means 10% of them are wrong. Neo, played by Keanu Reeves, believes that Morpheus, Lawrence Fishburne, an elusive figure considered to be the most dangerous man alive, can answer his question, what is the Matrix? Neo is contacted by Trinity, played by Carrie-Anne Moss, a beautiful stranger who leads him into an underworld where he meets Morpheus. They fight a brutal battle for their lives against a cadre of viciously intelligent secret agents. It is a truth that could cost Neo something more precious than his life. Came out March 31st, 1999. Directed by, at least in the credits, it says the Wachowski brothers, but now they go by Lana and Lily, and had a box office of $465 million on a budget of somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 to 80 million. No, 63 million estimated budget. So, Robert, let's get your take and your opening salvo on The Matrix, please.
So we are delving into Robert's top 5 list. You're going to my number 2 of all time with the original Matrix movie. I remember being a much younger Robert, early 1999, seeing the trailer for this movie. I remember I was watching another movie, and I saw the trailer for The Matrix for the first time, and I knew instantly it was going to be awesome. There's just something about it, the quality level, the genre, the martial arts. It combined so many things that I loved, especially at that time. You know, kicking ass, telling a futuristic story, incorporating some philosophy. I was a philosophy minor in college. I don't know if this really had anything to do with it, but it played off of my desire for understanding reality and what you could possibly know and not know. And it all came together in this film. There are so many quotable lines, so many fantastic scenes. The pacing is probably my favorite. It's probably my best paced movie I've ever seen, where every scene does work. There's no wasted time. It's just a superbly well put together movie. Now I know it's not a wholly original idea. There's that one Mother of the Matrix lady that thinks that her ideas were totally ripped off. I don't give a shit. It all came together to make this fantastic movie, and the Wachowskis haven't topped themselves since. This is their magnum opus, as far as I'm concerned. It's got the not very good Keanu Reeves. It's got the fantastic Lawrence Fishburne. It's got the decent Carrie-Anne Moss. Remind me who played Agent Smith again. I can't remember, but he's fantastic.
Hugo Weaving.
Thank you. Hugo Weaving is fantastic in this film, who went on to do Elrond in Lord of the Rings movies. But he is, I mean, whenever he's on screen, he's fantastic. And Morpheus is on screen, he's fantastic. And the movie is just such a well-told story that it really doesn't, I was mentioning this to Daniel earlier in the pre-show, that it doesn't require a very charismatic lead. He's not, you don't have to get emotionally involved in Neo's story necessarily. You don't have to connect with him on an emotional level to, really care about what's happening in the story. It's just such an amazing story that you're just, transfixed the whole time. It's so good that even to this day, I don't know what they're doing with this reboot or part 4 or whatever it is they're doing. I'm glad they're going back to this. Well, maybe we'll see. I don't know if they've got some massive brainchild that they just have to do it because it's too good of an idea to pass up. I hope that's the case. But I really don't see, this is kind of like The Princess Bride for me, where people are like, this is sacrilege if you come back and you try and remake this. For me, remaking this is almost sacrilege. It's almost a perfect film. I'm curious to know what other people have nitpicks about, because I've got the rose-colored glasses. I am almost incapable of seeing this movie's flaws. So I am looking forward to any kind of criticisms. I don't know if I'm going to be the White Knight for this film or if I am going to be pleasantly surprised by any criticisms, because I just don't know if I have any, other than saying that, some of the acting isn't great. That's right, about all I got.
It doesn't need to be great in this movie because, as you were saying, the story is so strong. It doesn't rely on the characters to really move it along.
Yeah, and in the movie, obviously it's had a huge cultural impact. I mean, apart from the copying of all the memes and the bullet time, all the mass forwarding of the special effects that were copied and made fun of and that kind of thing. But it's also, and then the culture aspects of the red pill versus the blue pill. But it's such a universal theme that there is this secret knowledge. And once you are exposed to it, the normies, they don't get it, but you know it and you understand it, and the other people just can't see it. Everybody else is just like an NPC. It allows almost anybody that feels not quite out of, a little bit out of the mainstream to identify with it. And it's just this massive universality that I think so many people can really enjoy it. I remember, I don't know, what was it, around 2005, 2006, maybe a little bit later than that. I was watching some Alex Jones clip, and he was talking about this movie, and he was like asking his guest, now this movie is so revealing about the New World Order. Let me get in my Alex Jones impression. This movie reveals so much about the reality of the world. How could they allow this to even be made? Hollywood, it's revealing all these facts and truths about the world. So, I mean, you can just transpose your own philosophies, your own beliefs about the world onto this, the idea that someone's had the wool pulled over their eyes the whole time until the truth is finally revealed to them. And then you feel like you've been red pilled.
Right. And it's a framework that's almost universalizable based on anyone's pre-existing belief structure.
Right. Whenever you figure out some new knowledge, whether you be on the left or the right, or spirituality or philosophy or aliens or whatever it happens to be, you feel like, oh man, am I like Neo? What's going on here? Anyway. That's my opening salvo.
No, that's pretty good, and I think that was generally our take a couple of years ago when we were analyzing this, and it was more from a perspective of that you can basically plug and play any philosophy in this and identify with the narrative structure of everyone else is fooled, and like there's the scene where he's in the construct, and there's the red dress woman, and Morpheus is telling him, all of these minds aren't ready to be free. So everyone here is potentially your enemy. Yet at the same time, you're trying to free them. And some of these minds aren't ready to be free. And man, oh man, has that been prophetic for the past year, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times have we made the point that if someone's salary or someone's emotional well-being depends upon not seeing a truth, they will not see it. So there's a line in the movie that says some people are so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will defend it to the death.
Yeah, so deeply inured. Yep.
Yeah.
And you're right. It is full of just excellent quotes and lots of. You could take any of those quotes basically and have a 10 or 15 minute like segment of our show. I'm pretty sure. But let's get our guest involved. What's your take on the opening and Robert's points?
Yeah. So I might disappoint you a little bit because I agree with all of that. It's yeah, it's also my number 2 film. Thinking of Lord of the Rings as being one film, the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, because it really is just one long film. But yeah, Matrix is definitely number 2. But yeah, it was definitely one of those formative movies.
All right, but you're not counting all 3 Matrix films, right? Obviously,
no,
you're not doing the same thing with Lord of the Rings.
We won't speak of those.
Well, we will next week
tonight. But... yeah. But I actually saw it at the drive-in. Do you guys remember drive-ins? do you have any near where you're at?
They used to exist.
Yeah, they're making a comeback.
Yeah. There's actually a couple pretty close to where I live that are like high ranked in the country. And used to go quite a bit. But yeah, I saw it in the drive-in and I was confused as hell because I was like 11 or something. But I suspect that if I had been a little older, it wouldn't have been so confusing. Because now, I mean, I feel like everything about it makes perfect sense to me. But like, in fact, that's actually one of the strengths is how they took this high concept that could have been a disaster in so many different ways. I mean, it could have been, and some people, I guess, one of the criticisms is from some people is that it's a little bit confusing. But the way that, especially like maybe at the very beginning where you're kind of like, what's the Matrix and what's not, that kind of thing. But I think that they took great pains to make it, and there's a lot of exposition, especially from Morpheus, but it's like really condensed in a way that is just, it makes sense. Like everything he says is just like, okay, so, humans are batteries, and like, and it kind of gradually builds up to that. But it's because he's kind of like, he knows that Neo's about to go through the shock of his life, but he's trying to kind of prepare him for it a little bit. But it just, I think the writing is just does such a good job of not making it confusing and being like, yeah, this is what's going on. You were plugged in the Matrix, now you're not. And anyway, where was I going with that? But yeah, the point about it being kind of a blank slate that you can paste your philosophy on is spot on. I think that was kind of what they were going for. And I think that it does, it is universal, because I mean, for a long time I thought of it in terms of just like, oh well, they're probably, because I was projecting onto it, like, which I think probably a lot of people do, especially when they're younger and they first see it, they're probably like, oh my god, this is about me in this whatever way. And I was just like, oh, this is about like how they, I mean, once I kind of understood it better later, this is like the red pill is like understanding that the state is your enemy, pretty much, and the whole anarchist volunteers thing. But I'm sure that plenty of people had completely different interpretations based on whatever it was in their life that gave them that kind of like red pilly experience. There can be a lot of different, like Robert said, there could be a lot of different ways that you might have that experience. It wasn't Ron Paul for everybody. But yeah, so.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You could be learning any kind of knowledge, and as long as you feel like you are some sort of secret, it's just, you know, it's just not known or understood by the normies. Then, or
Right.
if you feel like it's being suppressed in any way, like, oh, the mainstream media doesn't talk about X, and I know about X, so what's really going on here?
Mhm. Yeah, and I
It
think
allows. Yeah.
they probably were, and I don't know where they were at, where the Wachowskis were at in terms of their, you know, I mean, obviously they weren't out as trans yet at that point, and I don't know where they were at psychologically as far as like understanding who they were, and but I imagine that it was at least part of the inspiration. But if that was the case, they did a great job of not making it about that, about themselves. It was they made it um, so accessible.
Yeah, you know, I actually noticed that in watching it again, that Switch seemed to be aptly named if that was like a breadcrumb they were putting out there.
Yeah, she was actually that role was supposed to be played by a man and a woman. The Matrix Switch was supposed to be a male, and the real world Switch was a female. But they ended up deciding to just have the same actress play both. But yeah, that was why they called her Switch. But she does have a little bit of that like androgynous thing going on still in the final cut. So
Yeah. So
there's a little
another
nod
thing
there.
I wanted to bring up, and I know, Robert, this is something you really like, is that they present like a base of rules and then they follow them for the most part. And they're pretty strict to them. They don't break them. They don't contradict themselves in the world that they've built, at least in this first film. They kind of get weird in films 2 and 3, but I think in this one they hold pretty true to what they present to you, and that's what makes it also so good, because so often films will present rules or logic and then go against them or contradict themselves and then not reconcile that.
Yes, absolutely. There, rewatching it though recently, these past few days, I did notice one thing that. So I will nitpick my own saying that this is a perfect movie. So this is one minor criticism, is that in the introduction, where there's this martial arts scene with Carrie-Anne Moss, and she's kicking the ass of these cops and whatnot, and then the agents appear. They don't just immediately transform into the bodies of the cops that see the Carrie-Anne Moss, whereas in later on in the movie, they're just warping from person to person to person, whoever happens to be in line of sight of Neo, apparently, or something like that. So anybody who sees Neo, or anybody who sees someone that you know they're trying to chase,
Oh
they
yeah,
can
like the
just
homeless guy or the helicopter pilot
or the guy with the cell phone, or anybody, or the lady with the knife in the apartment.
right.
They could just warp around. But in the very beginning, they're just like, no, we show up on set, and then we actually like take the time to walk up the stairs and move around and do things to finally get to Carrie-Anne Moss. Yeah, but the intro is a fantastic introduction to the whole world.
Yeah.
The movie is really, the storytelling is like a breadcrumbs approach. You are told exactly what you need to know as the story moves along, and then finally you get the full kind of appreciation and understanding of what's actually happening when Neo does. So I love the way the story is told and it unfolds. But yeah, it does a little bit kind of break its own world somewhat, because there's no reason why the agents don't just warp into the bodies of the cops immediately who are fighting her, other than, well, we can't have her fighting the agents right away. So it's not 100% perfect, but that is such a minor nitpick. I really don't fault it for them wanting to breaking their own rules a little bit to tell a good story. You know what I'm saying?
You know, yeah, but I could see that being an acquired thing or an adaptive thing. It is an artificial intelligence, and they're finding new ways of trying to apprehend, you know? So perhaps they had to
if that was explained.
Sure. Yeah, potentially. But also that opening scene, I think that they shot that before the movie was fully greenlit. I'm harkening back to the cobwebs in the back of my head here, watching like a lot of the behind the scenes documentaries, and they said that they did that opening scene and then showed that to whoever was going to greenlight this, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're going to make this movie."
Oh, that's a great sales tool for sure. Make that, spend about 50 grand or whatever, and make that. Or however much they spent, who knows? Probably not very much. And then send them that, because that did have the scorpion kick or whatever it was. Not the scorpion kick. It was the jumping up and then Karate Kid kick or whatever.
Yeah, she does like the wall climb thing, maybe.
She does the wall climb, but then she gets to jump up, and then the camera moves and pans around her while she's in midair. Yeah,
which they had to do with film cameras, like an array of like 36 or 48 film cameras, like Nikons, all in this rig to do that.
That's nuts.
Yeah, and then turn that into edited film. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, now these days you can do it like with an iPhone or something. But yeah.
Just do like a, what do they call that? Not artificial reality, but some kind of oh shit, there's a name for it.
Augmented reality?
Yeah, augmented reality. There you go. Thank you. Thanks for bailing me out. The old man getting bailed out here. But yeah, I mean, it's really cool. But the other thing related to this film and the special effects, it certainly was a watershed moment in advance. Like sometimes there'll be scientific revolutions where you point to a certain like discovery, and then it's the new paradigm. This seemed to be one of those shifts in paradigm, similar to what Star Wars was in 1977 or whenever, for special effects. The Matrix was another one. And it changed ever since then how special effects were done. Unfortunately for The Matrix, my eyes of watching it today or yesterday versus 10 or 15 or 20 years ago when it came out, they don't look as good. I remember being blown away by the effects in this. And then I watched it again, and I'm like, it's pretty good, but I'm not blown away, which is I feel bad about, because this was that breaking the mold, but now it's been, surpassed in many ways, so that it has lost some of its luster. Robert, what's your take on that?
Well, I wonder if this next incarnation of The Matrix is going to equally be a watershed moment for special effects, or if they're more, interested in telling a good story, or if they're just like, hey, we got this new technology. I know like what James Cameron with his next 3 Avatar movies, I know he's really pushed the boundaries in terms of what they can model underwater. I guess apparently one of the movies or multiple of the movies take place underwater a lot. And they've really upped the technology levels of making it look realistic without actually having anybody actually underwater. So that's pretty cool. But I don't know what they could possibly do or what they have done or what kind of new technologies they've invented. But I worry, based on what the Wachowskis have done since this movie, that they don't have a whole lot of new good ideas. I think that they kind of spent their load in this movie. I know at the time they said that, this is like every cool idea we've ever had. And they merged it all into this one script and this one movie. And then when it was a huge hit, they said, okay, what are the next couple of movies going to be about? And they were like, what? Next couple of movies? What? Okay, I guess. Okay, let's think of something. And then we got Revolutions and, Reloaded and
we'll talk about those soon.
Not super great. And I worry. I just worry. I mean, he's had or she's had 20 some years to think about it. But I don't know. I tend to be we also waited 20 years for Dumb and Dumber sequel that was really, really bad.
And Bill and Ted?
I worry that it's going to be like the 50-year-old person trying to be hip and cool again, instead of just doing their own thing and making something new in this world and showing us something that we haven't seen before because they actually have a real good idea and they're really going to push something forward again. I tend to think that it's like them trying to relive their youth. You know, it's like, hey, remember that cool thing we did when we were like young? Wouldn't it be cool to go back and do it again with this new technology and whatever, like the George Lucas style of filmmaking? And I'm worried that it's going to be just lame, but I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong because I love The Matrix and I want it to be done well and to be done justice to. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I really just hope that they're coming at this with something new and something awesome to show us and not just updated graphics.
Yeah, though that does have an appeal to me in watching this. And I'm like, oh, imagine what they could do with today's technology. Like how much more they could pull off if they were, you know, had that imagination still to make something awesome. But it's a bit of a fine line.
But what are you going to do? Are you going to put like 55 Keanu Reeves and have him do all his martial arts stunts and have it be like super cool? Is that what we're going to do?
In like 100 Agent Smiths?
And like 500 Agent Smiths? It was lame back then when they did that. What's cool? I hate it when a movie, when a director or a producer or any, filmmakers don't understand their own damn movie and what's cool about it. What was cool about The Matrix, at least for me, was having a character undergo this transformation and experiencing this new reality where, the lines like, you think that's air you're breathing? How badass is that line?
That's my favorite line in the movie.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's the perfect encapsulation of this character experiencing this whole new world and having his mind just blown. Like, holy shit, I did think that was air I was breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And now I don't. And what does that mean? That's amazing. Are we going to get another line like that? We didn't get any of those lines in Reloaded or Revolutions. There was nothing like that. And there were multiple scenes in the original Matrix that were like that. That were just like, holy shit, that's amazing.
Yeah, the no spoon.
The no spoon. Would you have still broken it had I not said anything? Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of shit that's like that. And we didn't get any of that in the sequels.
The Oracle told him what he needed to hear to get him to do what he needed to do. So she sort of lied to him, but that's what he needed to hear. He needed to believe he wasn't the one to actually be able to pull it off.
Yeah, this book that I've been reading, The Matrix and Philosophy, it has a section there where it talks about how that was inspired by probably inspired by the whole story of Socrates and the Oracle at Delphi, because there actually was a Delphi at the foot of Mount Parnassus, and there was this crack where some kind of gas was like leaking up out of the earth, and it would like make you it basically would get you high, and you would like speak in tongues and stuff, and so it was this kind of like holy thing where they would have like a like usually I think it was an older woman who would basically who would inhale the fumes, and then there was you couldn't go and actually talk to her, but you could talk to like an interpreter who would pretty much tell you what she said, or come up with something. And that cave where they had that, where the Oracle was at, they had an inscription of it was the Greek version, the what she has on her above her door, oh dang it, I forgot
thyself,
what it,
or
yeah,
to own self the truth.
Yeah, it's in Latin. It's I forgot what it actually is, but the actual words, but it means know thyself, and there was an inscription of that at the actual Oracle at Delphi. Yeah, so and she so Socrates got got this message from the Oracle that he was the wisest man or something like that, and he was like, what, that can't be. And the whole thing was he was, obviously he was killed. He had to drink the hemlock, I think it was, because he was convicted of corrupting the youth by telling them, these people, these authority figures are not so wise, and just a few cleverly worded questions can show that people are not nearly as smart as they think they are, which is great. Obviously, a great message, but yeah. So that in many ways, and there's all sorts of philosophical references that we could talk about with this movie, but that is one of the big ones. But yeah, that Oracle scene, I love it because I literally just rewatched the movie before we started doing this, and I think, I mean, the film is very, very, very carefully structured. Everything about it, I think, is very intentional. But that scene in particular, I think, it's kind of playful in the way that they have like all these little details, like like the hitting the vase, and like she says, what's really gonna bake your noodle is whether you would have broken the vase if I hadn't said anything, and the way that she's inhaling the smell of the the cookies is kind of like the fumes, and I think she even sits on a three-legged stool, which is like the Oracle, I guess, would sit on like a tripod type of thing. And there's even more details to it than that, I think. But yeah, just her demeanor, the way that, and I can't remember the actress' name, but the way that she plays that part is brilliant. And just all the subtle emotions that she conveys while she's kind of taking him through this. Everything she's doing is very intentional. Every little detail, giving him the cookie, telling him, you're going to feel better as soon as you start walking, or as soon as you walk out of here, telling him he's really not the one, or she kind of says he could be the one if something happens. She kind of gives him that like little nod, like you've got the gift, but you're waiting for something. So she's not really lying to him at all. I don't think. And she tells him exactly what he needs to hear by saying, you're going to have to choose between your life and Morpheus's. And everything that happens in the rest of the movie happens because of how she structured that meeting. So in a way it's manipulative, I guess, because like she knows exactly what to say to him and exactly what to do to get him to do the thing. But yeah, I just thought that scene was so well done.
Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Agree. It blows. It throws me off though when in the next film when it's like a different person playing the Oracle. It's sort of like when they did the mom switch in what was it? Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, was it?
Yeah,
I don't remember, but I believe you. When they changed the Oracle, in my opinion, for the worse, because this scene that you're talking about, Jeremiah, is so fantastic. Played so perfectly by that actress. And I know she died, so they couldn't get her.
Right.
But I really thought that she brought something kind of just like that wisdom. She just feels like that wizened person that knows more than she's letting on and just tells you. There's something about the way she played it that was so perfect for that role in that time, in that moment, that it's just some sort of magic on screen. It's fantastic.
And what's great is that like normally that's the point of a movie where it lags, and that is like the slowest moment in the movie, really. I mean, kind of, because you're at this point, it's like he's having this conversation with Trinity, and then he goes and he's talking to Morpheus, and then he goes and talks to her, and it's like kind of a slow part of the movie, but you don't notice that it's slow because it's so just because it's just pregnant with like all of this foreshadowing, I guess. Like you just are like, and they kind of build it up like, what is she going to say to him, so you're actually fascinated.
It's like
you're actually like pulled in just by the conversation. So it's a movie. I mean, it's very, very rare for a film to be both an excellent action film and also to be so good at like those quiet, intimate moments. That's almost non-existent.
Yeah. And even if you're enjoying that scene for I don't know, just the craftsmanship of that scene. You could watch it without any appreciation for all the underlying philosophy, and like you were talking about being similar to the Oracle of Delphi. But you could watch that scene and just have a gut instinct that something more is happening in this scene than you understand. It's deep just by watching it and experiencing it without necessarily knowing what it is. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's just there's some kind of magic in that scene. Yeah, some kind of magic in this whole damn movie that has made it still be my second favorite movie of all time. All this time later, and having watched how many hundreds of movies, and man, even though I will say that I have had 15 years of watching MMA now, and the martial arts, looks a little bit hokey and funny now. There's still some really cool moments in the martial arts, don't get me wrong, but a lot of it does feel like, okay, this is a movie fighting. This isn't like real fighting. I don't know what I want. I probably still want some mix of the two, but
maybe a little flair, a little spice.
I like the flair and the spice, but maybe I want a little bit more realism now that I've understand what real fighting looks like. For the most part, I know MMA isn't exactly 100% real fighting with the rules and the gloves and whatnot, but it still looks a whole lot more like real fighting than what's going on in the Matrix. Now, I understand it's a sci-fi world, and you basically have these super beings fighting each other. So, I give it some leeway in that sense, but some of the punching and the kicking does look a little bit, obviously, overly choreographed. Let's put it that way. Yeah. I still love it. I don't want it to change, but I want it to be a little bit different in the remake. Maybe they'll take some influences from MMA.
That is one area where I think they could definitely. That's definitely an area where they could do something a little bit different, and I hope that they do. I actually had a fact about the stunt coordinator, guy by the name of Wu Ping Yuan, if I'm saying that right. He's from Hong Kong, and they actually. The guy he gave them a ridiculous quote of what he was going to require to do the movie, because he didn't really want to do it, and he thought they wouldn't. And he had some conditions like, he would have to train the actors for like a couple of months before he filming anything, and they granted every request, so he ended up doing it. And so they actually put like a shitload of money and time into those scenes to do that choreography. I think that shows, and they do a lot of their own stunts, and it's just cool.
Yeah, and there's a great economic lesson in that, and I actually remember that from the behind the scenes stuff where he basically made this exorbitant demand because he didn't want to do it. So it's like a subjective value thing. Like, it's worth more to me to not do it, to basically turn this down without saying no. And then if they do say, okay, yes, then it's well worth your time, right?
Right.
So when my wife was running a salon like 10 years ago, and that was one of the things we talked about was like the pricing. Like, do you want more customers or do you want fewer customers, but they're, more important, more willing to, pay a higher price? And then it becomes like, okay, I can either not work or I can work and make a fair amount of money. And I've actually applied that in certain things, certain aspects for my day job, where if there's a job that we don't really want to do, I'll just double the price and be like, okay, here's our price. And, no, doesn't hurt me if you don't do it, that's fine. But if you do it, well, then yeah, everyone's happy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good way of looking at it.
That also applies to almost any kind of business, right? Like, I know you've mentioned in the past, Daniel, having that, if you see a Kickstarter and you'll see that $1 level, and then you'll see the $5 and the $10 and the $20, then you'll scroll down, you'll see like the $50,000 level. And it's like, who's going to do that? But there are a few people. They're like, yeah, 50 grand. And then sure, I'll do whatever it is I said I would do for 50 grand a pop. I don't care. That's great.
Right. Yeah. Now, if I could shift us back to the Oracle scene just a little bit, because this plays into the logic and narrative that they try to build. This entire group of humans has been working for a long time trying to find a way to defeat the Matrix, and so they have all these potentials, and that's what they. Those are all those kids that are brought to the Oracle to see if they have the abilities and that they might be the one. And they make a point to say that we don't usually free minds older than a certain amount, and that Neo was too old really to be freed, but they somehow knew or had discovered that he was most likely the one. But like all those other people who had been freed were all little kids. And I felt like that was a really good allegory to, this is before you're indoctrinated. This is before you've gone through government schools and been, doing the Pledge of Allegiance for 12 years and been, fully initiated into the Church of Statism. So that's another thing I can see, laying my philosophy into the framework that's presented in this film of how people are before they're overly propagandized into something. That's when you still have the potential to reach them.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a good point. I don't think I've ever made that connection before, but
yeah. And I'm grateful to have been, that my brother was a little bit, kind of bonked me over the head when I was probably like, about 17 or 18, and he's, younger than me, like almost a year younger than me. And I was young enough that it wasn't, obviously it's still been through a lot of indoctrination, and I did have that kind of uncomfortable, experience, in a less dramatic way that Neo has, when he's finally realizes the truth and he, throws up and, has to handle it. And, Morpheus, and I really like that aspect of it, that they, that they emphasize that, because it could have been, it's just one of those many things that they could have kind of glossed over, that could have just not been done well. But they
it
really
could have been a musical montage, right?
Right. But the early part of that movie does have like a strong horror element to it, actually. And you kind of forget that because it's an action movie, but you rewatch it and you're like, there's some pretty disturbing stuff, like the bug crawling into his stomach. I mean, that's like alien kind of level, weirdness. Just like all the connectors that are really disturbing.
Yeah.
The
whole waking up scene where he's got all the hoses in him, and he's like takes that thing out of his mouth, and then that's
they really sell that, and it's just like, this is a shocking thing for him, and so I love that aspect of it, because that is part of that experience. The negative aspect of it is like, so much of what I thought was true is not true. And I was at a relatively young age when I realized that. So I'm grateful to my brother for that. But, him being in his 30s or whatever, that's rough.
Yeah, and I like, and this probably ties into the pacing that you were talking about, Robert, where they take half the movie getting to that point where Neo is finally like introduced to, here's what's the real world, and then the training and building it back up. They don't just, musical montage it.
Right. And like we've dealt with, I mean, it took how many years for me to come to grips and lose my statism? It's a shocking thing to be confronted with, these ideas or the truth as we see it. And as Neo is exposed to it, he rejects it out of hand at first. He's like, what are you talking about? Now, he's also someone who was open to the idea, right? But the truth is so shocking that he still has to take his time to come to grips with it. Even though he was looking for it the whole time, he wasn't quite prepared mentally for what it actually is, even though he knew he felt something was wrong. He had
that vague awareness.
Right. Like you and I would come up with these ideas on how to save the world. And it was always like, yeah, but there's always this problem. And then there's that problem. And something doesn't quite feel right, even though I'm not exactly sure. I can't put my finger on it, but it's not quite right. He's in that situation, and then when he's actually confronted with the real truth, it still takes time for him to really come to terms with everything. And then, of course, then there's Cypher, who's like, yeah, none of this. This is all bullshit. I still would prefer. I think it's fun. I think, and then the later movies come up, really play with this idea, and I don't think in the best way, but that even the rebellion is a steam valve, and that Zion and everything else is still within the Matrix or whatever. I think that's the ultimate level of control, right? Where you think you're doing well, you're Antifa, you're fighting the man, you're out smashing up windows and breaking things, but you're actually still just part of the system, and you actually perform an important function in maintaining that system.
Controlled opposition.
Yeah. It's some deep shit.
No,
for sure. I didn't even think about that angle of it, but yeah, I mean, that was that kind of leads into one of the things I was going to ask you guys about, as far as the violence, that the good guys do perpetrate. They do, and I want to talk a little more about Cypher too, but, they just shoot up those guards like it's nothing. And I want to say that's the first time where they are actually like killing actual people. The good guys are like actually killing people, which, I mean, it's for what they consider to be a good reason. But I wonder what your guys' take on that is. Like if maybe they should have found a different way, or.
Well, these are people who are in the pods, right? And they think they're in the real world. So they do die in the pods as a result of dying in the Matrix, right?
Right. It's my understanding of it.
Yeah, you're right. They don't have any kind of moral qualms with killing these NPC people, even though they're basically living in this manufactured world. They have no real agency of their own, right?
They're fully propagandized.
Fully propagandized. I think it might be interesting maybe for this last movie or this next movie to play around with that idea. It definitely would probably get in the way of the story in this one. But yeah, I want to say that if you're going to be perfectly ethically moral, you might want to use less lethal methods, because these people
they're essentially victims.
They are victims of the same machine that everyone is. Maybe
they're making a greater good argument. Like, we're going to break this system, but we have to crack a few eggs to do it for the greater good.
That argument has been made many times. Yeah. It's a terrible argument, but man, yeah, that's a tough one.
But they do set it up when Morpheus says, these are the minds that aren't ready to be freed, and they are your enemy, but they're also the victims here. Like, these are the minds you're trying to free, but they are your enemy while they're in the Matrix. So
and there is no moment though by the heroes where they're like, yeah, fuck you, cop, or whatever. They are fairly sympathetic, right? They're doing it because they have to, or they feel they have to, not because they want to. That's something, I guess. Now, I do appreciate that they openly celebrate that guns save the day. They're like, yeah, we need a whole bunch of guns to go.
We need lots of guns.
Yeah,
we just need a lot of guns. That's how we win this day. And a lot of Hollywood movies do that, but they aren't so openly pro-gun about it. They're like, yeah, we're going to go and save the day with these guns, but at no point they're like, well, what we really need is just a lot of guns. So,
yeah.
There is one scene related to that, and that is when they've got the Gatling gun in the helicopter and they're shooting up the office that they're holding Morpheus. I don't understand how they can fire that many bullets into that space, hitting only agents and not Morpheus. Seems a little bit of a stretch, but I'll grant
What?
some plot armor to Fishburne there.
Yeah, man. Morpheus has got full-on plot armor. It's all good. Now, did you have a problem with Neo being kissed back to life at the end? Because I know my sister did. She was like, yeah, what's up with that? Kiss of life, that's some bunch of bullshit. I tend to give this movie such a pass that it didn't really bother me at all, but I could see how that might bother somebody that didn't love this movie as much as I did.
Yeah, it's a Hollywood thing, I think. There's a couple of those little, like you said with the plot armor. I mean, there's certain things like that where they're trying to, it was the right moment for like a big, like epic love, love scene type of thing. Like this is all about love, it's very Hollywood, but it didn't really bother me.
I'm okay with it because it's sort of that moment, it's the inflection point where Neo realizes that he doesn't have to physically die in the real world because he dies in the Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was only mostly dead, right?
Yeah.
He's only mostly dead, and he's kissed back to life to be reminded in some way of what is real.
Mm-hmm.
And so then he can reincarnate or reanimate within the Matrix itself. And then the agents are no big deal to him. You can just like fight him off with one hand, barely paying attention, because now he is adapted to the environment to such an extent that he can stop the bullets and he can manipulate the things that are going on around him. So he has broken through whatever barriers were the rules of that structure that he was buying into still. So I can kind of buy into this, but then it doesn't make me think that the next two movies are even really possible if you've now got Neo fully, like if he's realized this power, then how do you even have the follow-up movies beyond this?
Yeah.
Good question.
He's just so overpowered at that point. You turn him into this mega Superman character. How do you have any kind of tension? Because what they ended up doing, obviously, was cloning Agent Smith a whole bunch of times, and it just looked silly. It's Neo versus 500 Smiths, and then they could both fly, and they like go Super Saiyan style in the last one.
I mean, the architect is kind of interesting in that there's maybe not multiple realities, but there's like multiple timelines or repetition. It's like Groundhog Day / Never Tomorrow, whatever it is, Edge of Tomorrow, where it's the same Neo going through the same process hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. So in fact, Neo isn't a real person. He is also a program, right?
Right. I assume, right? This is all
super
scripted.
Fuzzy.
It's really, yeah. And I'm sure we'll get into it more when we do those movies, but
yeah. And I don't know. I know you guys are going to do Animatrix. For whatever reason, I've never gotten around to watching that, but I think that's more of like a prequel thing. So I don't know if it answers some of these questions, but I am curious about like, how is it? Why did Morpheus pick this John Anderson fellow, Neo? And how is it that like Tank and Dozer are genuine children of Zion, all that, and I guess Morpheus too. But if or no, Morpheus isn't.
Yeah, he gets plugged in.
Yeah. But I'm curious about like how this crew, like kind of what that story is of that crew being put together. Like why did these people get jacked out of the Matrix, and how? And I don't know. I don't know if the Animatrix answers some of those questions, but I'm curious about that story.
Yeah, that's all fuzzy to me as well.
Yeah, I know there was a big push with a bunch of different video games that also kind of, this is like the real cross promotion, cross media push. I think when Revolutions, or maybe it was when Reloaded came out, I think it was probably Reloaded, that they made some stuff that you had to play through all the stuff and do all the things, and then it kind of told more of a coherent story.
Oh, okay.
But I've seen the Animatrix, and I don't think that you're right. It is all prequel-y stuff, more explaining how the machines rose up and how poorly they were treated at the beginning, like slaves, and then why they rose up and whatever. I don't think it goes into the story of this crew, but I know that there's the video game prior to Reloaded. If you played through the video game, it led right up to the beginning of Reloaded. I want to say, I'm really a little bit fuzzy on that, but yeah. Well, anyway, maybe we'll talk a little bit about that when we do that stuff. But
yeah, there's like 5 or 6 little mini episodes in Animatrix. So when we do that one, we're gonna have to talk about each one.
Yeah, but those are really well done. I want to say that some really talented manga and anime directors did those. I don't know if they were all written by the Wachowskis or had a lot of input from them, but I remember them being quite impressive visually for the time. So
yeah, it's all a little fuzzy since I haven't seen any of these in like 15 years. But I wanted to bring up the Cypher discussion because we are getting a little bit long, and I feel like we could talk another 2 hours on this.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we won't be able to. But Jeremiah, I know you had a few notes on Cypher, and I want to pose to Robert before we get into that. I know, Robert, when you and I kind of went on we took the red pill in our minds.
Yes, and you ruined my life. Yes.
Yeah. There were moments where you were like, "Yeah, this has ruined my life." So you almost had your Cypher moments where you're like, "I want to go back to not knowing. I want to go back to tasting a steak."
Yeah, there's that meme that's like, "What if? What if I could tell you you could lose all your friends?" And then I'll just introduce you to libertarianism and whatever it was. And you'll make new friends, but they'll be internet friends, because how many libertarians are there now? I mean, there's more than there were back when Murray Rothbard could fit them all in one room. But it is a growing philosophy, but it's still very much not normie friendly, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. If you talk to the average conservative, I think like real conservative, not Republican, but conservative, they're very much amenable to our ideas. They're like, "Oh yeah, government's garbage. What are you talking about? They lie to us all the time. Mainstream media lies to you all the time. I'm with you 100%. And then you work from those commonalities and say like, "Well, I'm also against war, and this is why." And it's like, yeah, government lies to you. They lies into war all the time. It's like super easy, barely an inconvenience about, connecting with those people. But for a lot of people, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, a lot of your relatives are very much going to be progressive lefty type people, because they're going to watch the mainstream media and they're going to identify and agree with a lot of the mainstream CNN, MSNBC narrative. And that is going to strain your relationships. And you're going to be the weird uncle that, especially during the evangelical phase, where you're going to want to talk politics and make everybody uncomfortable. And it's just going to strain all those relationships. And especially since there's a whole lot of young, hot, progressive women that were in the dating pool, that are still in the dating pool. And they're almost like, man, that's really not interesting anymore. Like, I think I've mentioned this in the past, that, you see a lot of these women on these dating apps, and they've got their, pro-vax, thing around their face, their profile face, and they're all wearing the masks in their sexy poses and stuff like that. And for me, in my world right now, I still remember the lefty side of me that's like, yeah, that's the science. What are you talking about? Of course you're going to wear a mask and you're going to be pro-vax and all this. And I remember that Robert very clearly, and having no problem with that woman there in that pose and being like that. And I would have been still very attracted to that person. But today's Robert, I'm like, that is gross. I don't want anything. That mindset is so alien to me. Just because I associate a whole lot of obeying authority to that. It's not just that she celebrates vaccines and she's hoping to get back to her previous life of being able to do things, and wearing a mask allows her to still live her life a little bit. It's more of that mindset of, well, I'm going to do what I'm told. That's what's really gross to me. And it's all over the place. So yeah, you've ruined my life, Daniel. Thank you. Would I go back? No. I think my life is better now than it was then. I think I have a clearer understanding of what my rights are, and that I'm a sovereign individual, and that I own myself, and the world makes more sense to me. It's still a crazy world, but from my perspective, I am at peace with myself. Whereas before, I think my thoughts, there's so many contradictions in the average progressive lefty's mind, all these things that you gotta be like, they have no principles, from in this sense, they're just all about power. And when it comes to this story, as long as it furthers their agenda, they're for it. But when somebody else does it, they're against it. And it's gotta be the cognitive dissonance it's gotta make them feel weird on some level. You know what I'm saying? It's just got to be so
maybe
bizarre.
They have that splinter in their mind that they can't quite grapple with, but then they're so distracted by the propaganda and the echo chamber that they can kind of drown it out.
Yeah. And they just move on to the next issue and the next issue and the next
outrage. The next outrage.
Yeah. And they forget what they said a week ago, because now the progressivism moves even further forward.
Yeah, and I echo your criticisms, but I wouldn't only isolate them to progressives. Obviously, I think that conservatives, Republicans, etc., also have their own contradictions. Bob Murphy had really great episodes on his podcast where he did, serious questions for conservatives, and it was like 15, about contradictions for them, and then a whole nother episode for progressives, and it was like, yeah, these things don't reconcile. But with a conservative, I think you have a chance at that's going to actually bother them. Whereas it's less of a chance.
And a lot of that comes from a religious upbringing and not necessarily being holding the state higher than the religion. But I'm not exactly 100% sure on exactly all the reasons.
Well, I'll find those and put those on the show notes page, because I think that they are really good. I'm a big fan of Mr. Robert P. Murphy. So go to lastnighters.com/174 and you'll find links to those once I find them and post them up on here. But Jeremiah, let's get your notes and your commentary on the cipher phenomenon, and maybe, if you also see what we've seen with basically, engaging with the NPC types with the blue pills.
Yeah. Well, the cipher thing, I think one thing I love in a villain is that their motivations are as understandable as the motivations of the heroes. So it's like, I think probably a good example of that would be in the movie Skyfall, Javier Bardem's character, I can't remember the name of the character, but he's like, he's like this psychopath, and he has this kind of like whole story about how he like was really messed up by this like cyanide pill thing that was supposed to kill him but didn't, and like you feel really bad for him, and it's like, yeah, what he's doing kind of makes sense from his perspective. But that I feel that way about Cypher, because it's like when he's sitting there eating that steak that does look delicious, they do a really good job of giving that, they kind of like almost steel man the blue pill perspective a little bit, because it's like, it's so much easier to just like go. I mean, in that, in the context that they built up, it's like, yeah, it would be a lot easier just to like live in the Matrix and be whatever. Like maybe you'll have the splinter in your mind, but you can kind of just ignore it. And actually, I've been listening to a lot of Jordan Peterson lectures lately, and there's a bunch of things that like he's so like he's so broad and deep that like you just automatically, or I find myself just automatically applying his ideas to like everything, and I'm like, yeah, that just gives me a little bit of insight in that. Um, but he had this he made this point about how, like, you know, it's uncomfortable to be like in an existential crisis, and you know, um to not know quite what you're doing or what's true, but you know what's meaningful to you. But it's like you don't want the responsibility of, or it's easier to go through life without shouldering that responsibility that goes along with actually um you know, building a meaningful life. Because there's so many things where you have to be like, okay, I have to like set these boundaries, and I have to maybe I have to form this relationship, or end this relationship, or maybe I have to, you know, do things I really don't want to do. And he always talks about how you have to look in places, you know, what you need most is in the place you least want to look, which is a quote he got from Jung. Um, but yeah, so I understand where Cypher's coming from when he's like, you know, I'm eating the same crap every day. I'm in this like cold ship, and it's just like this life sucks. And he hasn't been able to find, for whatever reason, he hasn't been able to, you know, the meaning hasn't met up with the level of responsibility or what he's had to go through. So he's just done with it. And you know, it's understandable. I mean, obviously he's, you know, a villain and ends up doing terrible things. And I would like to think that I'm not that kind of person. But as Jordan Peterson also says, maybe you are that kind of person. So you kind of have to figure that out. And that's involves really going to dark places within yourself. So yeah, it's I love the way that Joe Pantoliano plays that character. And there's a lot of little things, like rewatching the movie, I noticed like there's so many things. Him being the villain is totally given away when he drops his phone into this like garbage bin, but it's like a really quick thing, and most people probably don't notice it the first time they watch it. But in addition to that, there's like so many little like nods or like little things he'll do, even like facial expressions, or like just kind of the way he talks to Trinity, which is kind of creepy. There's just like these little things that are that foreshadow that he's going to betray everybody, but he's just normal enough that they don't catch on to it.
Yeah, like when Neo kind of sneaks up on him, and he quick changes the screen to something else because he probably had something up he shouldn't have had. Sort of like, you know, I've done that when I worked in an office environment, looking at some non-work related thing, and then somebody sneaks up behind you, like quick alt tab.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, he has that moment where he's like, you scared the bejesus out of me. But yeah, that's just another one of the many great things about the movie. Because you do, yeah, I don't know. And I love steak, and that steak looked like it was a perfect medium rare. So
that's right.
That just really it sells it for me.
Still could walk across the room.
Right.
The one thing about the Cypher making that deal, he loses all leverage once he gives up the information, and he would have no reason to believe that the agents would in fact plug him back in. Once he has done his thing, he is a disposable, useful idiot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he needs to hang on to something. He has to. Otherwise, yeah, there's no... I mean, I know he says he wants to remember nothing once they plug him back in, but how did they go over exactly how he would be plugged back in? It didn't even look like so. They had a process for doing that. They had every process of eliminating people when they were dead or understood to be otherwise or whatever. But
yeah, they'd Soylent Green him, feed him to the...
Yeah, I mean, it could have been just purely an empty promise, and he's just so desperate to get out that he would pretty much just rather almost commit suicide at this point. I think that's probably where he's at.
I mean, honestly, that's probably like... It doesn't advance the movie, but I could see somebody in that position.
Yeah.
Like, would you rather do that or rat out all of these people to their certain death and then resign the entire, you know, balance of humanity to this slavery system that, you know, this is the only or last best chance to defeat it?
Yeah, that's even another layer where it's like he really is just he really just gives zero fucks at that point.
He is the guy that became a libertarian and then went back.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, it sucks over here. There's no women. I'm out of
Yeah.
here. There's one woman and she doesn't have any interest in me. She's in love with this other guy. So fuck this. I'm out.
Yeah, it was
And
like
goes
that
back to being a status.
Anarchist dating app, right? It was like one or like a dozen women and like 1,000 guys.
And yeah, even I think some of those women were fakes too. So yeah, it's bad. It's real bad. You have to go with the amenable conservative or non very political people, and they're open to your ideas.
So this is the dating advice column with Robert here. All right, so I'm listening.
It's important information.
Well, we should put this behind the paywall, this important information. This should be the Patreon stuff. Go to lastnightsgops Patreon and get all of Robert's dating advice. All right. Did he mention he has a girlfriend? He mentioned it in the pre-show like
Listen,
a dozen
I've got
times.
a girlfriend, okay?
He's got a girlfriend, all right? All right, so we've been going for already over an hour and 20 minutes. So we are going to need to start winding things down. And I know there's like a million more things we could talk about. So that's one of the things I was afraid of with this movie. Yeah. I like my dumb comedies where I have like 2 or 3 points to make and, we can ham fist an episode out of it. This thing is just so big and so much to take on. So we're going to have to continue the conversation, I think, maybe in some post-show bonus content. And then also as we talk in future episodes in the coming weeks on the other movies, Robert, you and I can kind of come up with a few more things that we recall related to this movie. Because I want everyone's take on this one, because I think this really is the masterpiece, essentially. The rest of the movies just kind of exist, and it continues some things not so well. I like to say that Reloaded is a halfway good movie, and then it gets real weird and not so good. But I'll watch it again, and we'll figure that out. But let's cover off any final notes that you got to get out there within the episode, Jeremiah.
Actually, it did have a couple things that we didn't quite get to. Just real quick, I thought it was cool that they did like the little when Neo and Agent Smith are fighting toward the end, and they're in like the subway station or whatever. There's like a newspaper that flies in between them, like a tumbleweed in a Western.
Yeah.
I thought it was one of the moments in the movie. There's a few like that where it's kind of like gives like just a little bit of levity because it is a very serious movie. So I thought that was a nice little addition. And there's a lot of stuff like that where it's just like I said, this movie kind of shouldn't have worked because there's so many disparate influences being kind of crammed together. It's like somehow it's a kung fu movie, but it's also like a cyberpunk movie, and it's also like a
Western,
a dystopian horror movie, and it's like you could just go on. It's like influenced by like anime, and so that's impressive. I wanted to mention that there was the book. I don't know if you guys noticed the book that he has like cut out that has like his like secret stuff in it.
Simulacra and Simulacrum, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Simulacra and Simulation by Jean Baudrillard. I haven't read it, but from what I've read about it, it seems like it's that was probably a lot of the inspiration as far as the idea that like there's all this. Because the Matrix is basically symbols. It's kind of everywhere. There's like always these symbols. Like the very beginning of the movie, you're always seeing the Tank is always staring at all this code on the screen and all this kind of stuff. And that book is all about how like, we're not really looking at anything in the modern world. We're not really looking at anything real anymore to some extent. Like it's so many things are mass produced and artificial. Not that I don't like capitalism, but it's just an interesting thing to note that that was probably part of the inspiration. And actually, it was required reading. With Wachowski's made a lot of the main actors read that book, and even Keanu Reeves, they had him read some other stuff too, like on like evolutionary psychology and like some other stuff. And so I just thought it was interesting that they're like clearly well read and they know all the classic philosophy. And they made people read it for the movie and wanted to make sure that was the other thing. They wanted to make sure that they could explain what the Matrix was in their own words, because when they were actually like playing their parts, they really needed to have an understanding of how they fit into it to make it all kind of make sense, because it could very easily be confusing. I would think when you're making a film like that, it's like, wait, is this, the Matrix, or like how should I be acting
I
here?
like that. Yeah. Like that brings the cohesion.
Right.
And they all have that same kind of ability to articulate the understanding of the logic of the story.
And I also noted that it's kind of structured like a superhero origin story. If you kind of like map that onto like one of the Marvel movies, it's pretty similar, like the overall beats, like kind of the pacing of it and everything. A lot of it is like, there's always that little kind of like training montage, and there's one of those in this movie, and there's the point where he's just like doing like incredible things at the end. And that was kind of before the superhero genre, it really blew up. It was before the MCU was a thing. So I just thought that was interesting that they kind of did that.
It's like the first good superhero movie since Reeves Superman.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Okay.
I think that's all I got. My favorite movie, I gave it a 10. Or what? 10. What are we doing? 10 codes? I don't know.
Yeah.
10 Matrix codes.
10 women in red dresses.
Yeah, there you go.
10 flip phones. Yeah, something like that. Well, yeah, that's actually almost a good final summary review. And thank you for throwing your score out there already. So you give it a perfect 10.
Yep. I can't give it anything less. I just can't think of any reason to.
All right. Very good. Robert, you want to get into your final summary and review, and then I guess we're going to have to save some additional content for the paying public.
I'm going to sneak in one last comment about the movie that we didn't get to. The virus speech by Agent Smith when he's talking to Morpheus. I couldn't help but comment just a little bit about
he's not wrong.
Well, he is wrong.
I'm glad you brought that up.
I
forgot to bring it up. So
he compares human beings to a virus. He says that every mammal instinctively develops a natural equilibrium with the environment. I would expand that to every living thing. Every living thing develops a natural equilibrium, not because they care about equilibrium. It's because there are checks on their abilities. They want to be as successful as possible. Every living thing wants to live forever and pass on its DNA and do all the things, but there are natural limits and there are opposing elements that are always competing with people to be able to do things, or organisms to be able to do things and be successful. So when he says that every mammal isn't a virus, it's because they're not as successful as human beings are. Human beings are only somewhat similar to a virus because we're awesome. We are the best ass kickers. We make the best stuff. We have mastered all environments for the most part. I mean, we don't naturally want to live in Antarctica, but we could. We don't necessarily want to live next to a volcano, but we could.
Like in Hawaii.
That's right. We're just awesome because we got these big brains. We get the big brains. We can think of all the stuff, and we take advantage of the division of labor. Whereas, I guess lions do to some extent. He's got he pimps out all the lionesses to do all his work for him. I mean, there are elements of it, but we're the best at it. And I'm not going to apologize for being the best. That's just not something I'm interested in doing.
Well, I think Smith is right in when it's directed under the guise of the state, then it is far more destructive. And it goes beyond the equilibrium that would be found in voluntary interactions.
Fair point. Fair point. Although I have one more criticism of his speech. I think I like your element there. But when he says that human beings go to an area and then use up all the resources, it was like some kind of dumb critique of capitalism. like that we just like suck up all the resources, like we're some vacuum cleaner. And that doesn't speak to how capitalism actually works, because people still want to make money. They're going to grow trees. They're going to develop new technologies that allow us to get energy out of other things. The ever inventive mind of humanity. Yes, we do consume resources, but we also renew them. We also develop new technologies that allows us to use other resources. So it's not like human beings spread to a new area and then, we've developed, this is barren wasteland now, and we have to expand beyond that in order to even survive.
It's not the Lorax.
We're not the Lorax. Thank you. Same criticisms to that dumb movie apply here. Human beings are big brains, and we use them effectively. We're not perfect. Never said we were, but we're the best example of intelligence on this planet that we know of.
All right. So here's my other critique of Agent Smith's speech. What is the AI doing? They're doing the exact same thing. He's being very hypocritical. They have taken over the entire planet and have enslaved the entire human race, save for, the handful of people in Zion. They have extracted every ounce of resources on the planet. So Agent Smith is being rather hypocritical here.
Yeah.
Fair point.
Yeah, he's just trying to be trying to do his intimidating bad guy thing, and
in this zoo.
Yeah.
It's the smell. All right, Robert, final summary review.
Okay. What can I say about The Matrix? It's my second favorite movie of all time. Yes, I have a girlfriend. It's awesome. It's still, to this day, yes, the graphics are going to look worse. The special effects are they're going to age. That's just the way it is. They didn't do everything practically. There is some, like the spoon bending, it looks not good. There's, the bullet time animations, they're going to look worse. Because we've improved with our big brains, and we've made things be able to look even better. But at the time, holy smokes, my mind was blown at the time, and it's still a fantastic film. They didn't just rely on all special effects to impress everybody. They had an amazing story to go along with it that holds up to this very day. Now, were they inspired by all the classics? Absolutely. It's a hero's story. It's a hero's journey that is very familiar. It's used by, like Jeremiah was saying, with all the Marvel movies. You've got a hero that is very much in his normal element, not a hero. And then he is exposed to this new knowledge, and he undergoes through this training, and he goes through all these trials, and ultimately he emerges on the other end transformed. It's a classic story, and it speaks to the human condition, and that's why it's so popular. And the storytelling itself, the finale, the end, the converging elements of Neo, the tension inside the Matrix, and he's got to get out before these Sentinels come in and kill everybody. It's fantastic. How can I give this anything but, man, what did I give? I gave Casablanca like a 9.5. Can I give my second favorite movie of all time a perfect 10? I've never given a perfect 10. Never. So what I'm going to do is cheat. I'm going to cheat and give this 9.9. That's what I'm going to do. It's my highest rated movie that we've ever done. But it's not a perfect 10, probably for some dumb reason that I've nitpicked about. But it's so, so good. Still to this day. 2021 Robert says it's a 9.9 for him today. It's so damn good. Endlessly rewatchable. Hopefully the new movie that comes out, it does it some justice. But I don't think that they can necessarily like improve upon this. It's so good.
Right. And I think you can take that 1/10 of a point off for having the sequels.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So very good. 9.9. And Jeremiah, you said 9.5. Is that right?
You gave it a 10, no. Daniel.
Oh, 10. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking about my score, which will be a 9.5 for this. It holds up really well. The narrative is very strong. A lot of the points that Jeremiah, you brought up, give me a new appreciation for what helps make this so good. If all of the major players can articulate and understand the common vision or the common story at play here, then it makes sense that they're going to be able to do a better job at it. And it also is a movie that doesn't necessarily rely on the performances of the characters to be particularly outstanding for it to still be good. I think that it's such a strongly built story, and they have such a nice world that they've built for us that you can totally buy into it. And you can also apply yourself into it, or you can project yourself and your thinking and philosophy into it and identify with it in so many ways. And intentional or not, I think it really makes this stand the test of time and become a classic film almost when it came out. I can't think of another movie that has as much of an impact on cinema that I'm familiar with. I mean, there's Star Wars, and then there's this one. And there was, of course, great movies in the 80s and the 90s, but these two really stand out as far as being watershed moments in changing how cinema works. And so for that, I'm going to give it a 9.5. It's still holds up. It's a little bit dated, like Robert was saying, but it still is entertaining. It still is a journey worth watching, and you can find different things in it as you rewatch it. And as you evolve as a person and as you develop your own thinking and philosophy, you can see different elements and nuances in this one. So really, really well done. And I'm a little bit wary of what they're going to do in this reboot or fourth extension of it. But I am hopeful that it will be something that sort of Blade Runner 2049's it, where it's a nice, like, almost for the fans service. Maybe if they Snyder cut the thing a little bit, then maybe it's got a shot at being good. So hopefully.
Yeah, but the Blade Runner 2049, wasn't that done by like a really good director?
Yes.
And I just
it was
don't know.
Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah, that guy, he's like
same guy who did Arrival, which is a great movie.
And he's just like really talented, really knows what he's doing. I worry that Wachowski he's not quite on that level.
Well, this is just going to be one Wachowski.
Right. And maybe the other guy was holding him down, or girl, whatever. But we'll see. I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it. And I'm also looking forward to further discussion on the Matrix and Matrix related things next week when we do Matrix Reloaded with Pat McFarlane of Liberty Weekly. He's been on the show so many times. He's almost been on as much as Mike C, who was on last week, for another movie that had a lot of meaning and symbolism and nuance, and you could apply different things and how you look at it with the Kubrick film, Eyes Wide Shut. You could do that with almost any Kubrick film. But it's a lot of deep thinking stuff these last couple of weeks and next couple of weeks. So I'm really looking forward to that. Now, before that, and this is mostly because I had already scheduled some guests and some movies related to those particular guests before I conceived of the concept Matrix. So we're going to do a few specials this month. So Cinco de Mayo, we're going to be doing Desperado with the purveyor of peddling fiction. So that will technically be our next release after this one. And that'll come out on Cinco de Mayo. And then the episode with Pat McFarlane will be on our regular release schedule. And then we'll do Matrix Revolutions with Mike C. He'll be returning. And then we're going to be doing Animatrix the week after that with Ryan Jones, who was on for Logan and Watchmen and Selma, I want to say. And he was a really good guest. We had a lot of good conversation with him. So I'm excited to have him back. He's a bit of a comic book guy. And so I thought that's why Animatrix kind of fit in with him. So with all of those shows, I want to talk also about the original here and get their takes on it, and then what they think might be happening with the new one that comes out later this year. I think it's scheduled for release in December of this year.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see. hopefully the the pre-release like hype stuff. This franchise definitely has its hardcore fans. Not to the level of Star Wars, but maybe we can keep it going with this next movie. There's definitely going to be a whole lot of buzz as long as the pre-release stuff looks good. That I know a lot of studios like to do that with on-set photos and little teasers and that sort of thing to generate hype. But hopefully it'll all look good.
All right. Anyway. Well, thanks again, Jeremiah, for coming on and taking the red pill with us tonight in our dream world. And we'll, of course, have links to your podcast. And I hope you do get it launched again or relaunched. Sometime Reloaded. Yes. How could I miss that? Jeez, I'm getting so old. Yeah, get that thing reloaded up there. In the meantime, people can check out your 25 episodes that exist on there. And again, one of my favorites was on The Cable Guy, the Jim Carrey movie.
Yeah, and you guys gave that one a bump. I noticed in the numbers.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I remember we talked about it on something. I've been wanting to do that movie, but then you guys did it, and it was like, what? I can't top that. It's so good. So, yeah, people can check that out. Go to lastnighters.com/174. You can find the link to those episodes by Jeremiah, our guest, and also the two Bob Murphy episodes that we talked about, where the hard questions for progressives on hard questions for conservatives. I think those are really well done and worth checking out. So we'll be back next week, like I said, with 2 episodes coming your way. So we're going to be doing Desperado and also The Matrix Reloaded. And with that, we'll say goodnight from last night, everyone. Peace out.